Sometimes we just need to hear someone's voice. Maybe there's a family member, a friend, some loved one that maybe you haven't talked to for a while, or maybe you're just having a hard day and you speak to them on the phone, you're like, I just needed to hear your voice. Or maybe someone has said that to you, I just needed to hear your voice. Today in our gospel, Jesus tells us that we can hear his voice. He says, I am the shepherd of the sheep, and they hear his voice. And he says, I call them by name, and when I lead them out, they follow because they recognize the voice of the shepherd. And maybe we think, I don't know if God can really talk to me. Of course, what Jesus says matters. It mattered when he said, Lazarus, come out, and he came out. It mattered when he said, little girl, I say to you, arise, and she arose. This is the Jesus who is God incarnate, who entered into our life and suffered and died and rose for us, as we hear in our scripture passages today, so that we might live in righteousness, which is to live in a relationship with God, who is the shepherd and the guardian of our souls. And is this Jesus who says that we will hear and recognize his voice? Maybe sometimes what throws us off is that we think we have to hear some big, booming, audible voice, like in that movie, The 10 Commandments, where God's like, Moses. It's probably not going to happen. More likely if your name's Moses, I guess. But more likely it's just it's a voice or even a feeling in the depths of our heart. And that voice might actually sound familiar to us. We can think of the passage in 1 Samuel where the Lord is calling to Samuel when he's asleep. He says, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel thinks it's his master Eli. So 3 times he runs up to Eli and says, here I am, you called me, I heard your voice. And Eli helped him recognize it was really the voice of the Lord calling out to him. Maybe sometimes we can even hear the Lord speak to us in our own voice. What I want you to do right now is say your full name in your mind. Your name is very much real, but you just heard it in your own voice. Now, of course, there's other voices that can crowd out the voice of the Lord. The voice that says, you're not good enough. The voice that says, you're not lovable enough. That voice that says, you're a failure. All those voices are not from the Lord, because the Lord's voice is always going to bring us just consolation and encouragement and lead to our being built up as opposed to our being diminished. The voice that looks to tear us down is the one that Jesus says looks to steal and slaughter and destroy, not the one that came so that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Sometimes the voice of the Lord will challenge us. It might convict us of something, but it's never going to lead us into fear. And so we can hear the voice of the Lord speaking to us in our lives. So what I want to do is actually, this is a little different. Maybe it's very different for a homily time, but just wanted to invite us into spending a little time in prayer with the Lord and seeing if there might be something he has to say to us today. Now, of course, prayer isn't like a light switch. We can just flip it on, always. Sometimes we think that. So it might be kind of weird for me to be like, okay, pray. But I think maybe the Lord has something in store for us. I was convicted to do this. So I'm going to invite you to ask the Lord just a series of questions and just give you a few seconds to see how the Lord might respond to that. Now, if the Lord doesn't say anything to you at that time, it doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It just maybe means I didn't give you enough time. I think these are good questions that we can circle back in prayer when we have that more time in the quiet. So it may be, if it helps you to close your eyes, if it helps you to focus on our big crucifix here. I've been doing a lot of conversations with all of our First Communion class and their parents, and I always ask them, what's your favorite thing about the parish? And someone the other day said, the huge crucifix. I'm like, it is big, isn't it? Certainly reminds us of the depth of Jesus' love for us, the one who does say that who does call out to us and whose voice we can hear. So I just ask you to repeat again after me, and then we'll just spend a few moments in quiet. So I invite you to please repeat, Jesus, do you love me? Jesus, by what name do you call me? Jesus, what do you think of me right now? Jesus, what are you saying to me right now? Jesus, what are your dreams for my life? Whether you got a word from the Lord at this time or not, I know that the one whose words are true said, "This is my body, this is my blood." Let's go into a few minutes, invite us into a holy communion with himself to give us a share in his very life. And with the Lord as our shepherd, there's truly nothing else we shall want.